All right, welcome to the first ever episode of the Creation to Cash Flow podcast, where we are going to discuss strategies to maximize your creativity and achieve financial freedom. First thing we're going to talk about today, I think super fitting for the first ever episode, is shiny object syndrome. I think that's going to be a very fitting topic because throughout this podcast, we're probably going to talk about so many different ways to make money as a creator, whether you're a content creator or some kind of artist or other creative. And I think it's really important that people understand that if you do too many things, nothing will actually come to fruition.
Yeah. So, what would you say shiny object syndrome is defined as? Like, if you had to dumb it down into the most simple thing that people might struggle with, what would you say that is?
Yes, that's a really good question to start with. So I feel like shiny object syndrome is just that feeling that people get where maybe you're working on something, maybe you started a side hustle and you're finally starting to create a little income. Maybe you make your first $200 or $300, and then your friend next door tells you about this great thing that they're doing and they just made $500 trading stocks or something like that. And then, right when you were probably very close to having your breakthrough in the thing you were focusing on and learning, you jump ship and now you start trying to trade stocks. And then you and your buddy start getting good at that. And then your other friend figures out, wait a minute, I just made some money doing this. And you're always just chasing the next thing instead of getting really good at one thing.
So, would you think that is like a distraction? Would you define it as maybe like it's a distraction?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a distraction. And some people, even it gets to be a point of procrastination where
Ooh.
people find roadblocks in the thing that they're trying to get good at. And then they instead decide to pivot every single time it gets hard. I've done this in my own business where I used to do so much life coaching and so much business coaching. And when things would get hard with one, I would just flip to the other and I would be like, maybe I should just do this instead, and that is the perfect definition of shiny object syndrome, where you're just constantly chasing the next thing instead of staying focused on something that could be really good, profitable, and fulfilling.
That reminds me of the first call I ever had with you where I was like, "Nick, I'm overwhelmed. I have all these different things I'm trying to do. Like my biggest struggle is what do I focus on because there's so much opportunity everywhere." And you gave me really good advice. You gave me like a formula or something. What is it that you said? I can't even remember.
Oh, that is a really good and difficult question because it was definitely a while. You're only now jogging my memory about that. Oh, yes, I remember the formula. Thank God. That would have been so awkward if I didn't. Okay, so that formula was to focus on the 20% of tasks that produce 80% of the revenue. And maybe you're just a creative and it's not about the money for you. Focus on the 20% of input that creates 80% of the output, because it's so easy to just make up tasks that you think are productive, right? Like throughout the day, oh, but you have to do laundry and you have to do dishes and all of these things that are going to keep coming up, and you feel like you were being productive, but realistically, you were probably avoiding doing that 20% that might be challenging, but moves the needle 80%.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I feel like a lot of creators can relate to this, especially with how much information we're allowed to share with one another. Like when I started doing UGC, then I saw, oh, I can make digital downloads, and I focused all my time on that. And then I was like, oh, I can make an online course. Oh, I can do Amazon influencer. Oh, I can do email newsletters. And it was just, I was getting nothing done, but I felt like I was so busy every day, but there was never like anything I was actually doing. So, what advice do you have for people like that?
That's a perfect example of it. I've done that myself too. I'm like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to do this and do that. So you and I even have made sure, and we've put a lot of planning into this to make sure this is not just us getting shiny object syndrome. And
Mm,
this is something that we're committed to. And we're going to be producing a ton of episodes probably every week. So, audience members, hold us to it, right? We can't talk about shiny object syndrome. We're still susceptible to it as well,
yeah.
but it's just a constant battle. But anyway, best advice to combat this is absolutely to just focus on getting so good at one thing.
Mm,
Get so good at one thing that you can teach it to someone else without even thinking. Like, for example, in my own business, I shifted to e course and one on one coaching alongside it when I used to have so many different products and so many different offers that I was trying to balance. And instead of just getting good at one offer and one product, I was constantly flip flopping based on shiny object syndrome, whichever one was being profitable at the time. And I figured would be easy, but then it gets hard. And then you go to the other one. So just stay focused. All of our creatives out there, focus on getting good at one single thing. That might be making videos, that might be your art, that might be your blog, could be anything.
yeah, I'm thinking about it too. When I started my business in 2020, I started social media management, but then brands needed branding and website design. And so I was doing all of these different things, and they would bring in money, and websites brought in the most. And I had to teach myself how to do all these things. But I remember being like, what is it that actually fulfills me? So it's almost like I had to try different things to even figure out what is it that I actually want to do. And it always came back to content creation, but that was also the scariest thing to do because I felt like more was on the line because I actually cared about this. I was passionate about it. I really wanted it. And then when I got to content creation, I'm like, I don't have a freaking niche. What do I need to create videos with? So I tried every different thing, fashion, cooking, and I'm like, what do I actually enjoy? So I think that if any creators are struggling with this, I think it's important that we understand we can try different things, but when we figure out that thing that we actually enjoy and take off any negative self doubts from what might happen and just focus on, I know I like doing this, let me go for it. I think that's where the breakthrough comes.
I think you're totally right. Because yeah, there is a balance of being able to try new things that might be important and test things, but at the same time, if you chase two rabbits, you will catch none.
Mm,
And I know we
so,
talked about that the other day, and we were just talking about how much we love that quote
yeah.
because it's so true. I mean, if you're going to try and do two things and go all in on them, chances are neither is going to succeed in the way that you want. Success requires focused attention in one specific area for a long time with steady and consistent improvements, and that's how you become a master at something. So if you're looking to make more money or you're looking to just get really good and become an expert at something, you need to focus on that.
I have a question. It might be a hard question, but what would you say is a long time? Because I do know that some people try different things, but they don't try for long enough. And I'm like, you don't know if you enjoy it. You don't know if this is what you should focus on because you're trying it for a month and seeing that, oh, I don't see results. Let me try something else. And what is that little hamster wheel issue? And how do people get out of that?
That's such a good question. I feel like it could vary on a case by case basis, but just a bare minimum for how long I think that you should lock into one thing before deciding whether it's effective or not, 9 months.
9 months. So say that somebody can't
Yep.
decide between a few niches or something, which I feel like you don't even need one. But what if they wanted to try lifestyle with cooking? You suggest doing both for 9 months and just posting that or creating that type of content? What do you think in very specific terms for content creators? What would you say to somebody struggling with that?
Yeah, specifically to content creators, I think that's exactly what I would recommend. 9 months of doing both. And chances are you'll start to know in a few weeks. You'll be like, look, I love doing the cooking videos. The lifestyle takes too long and I don't get the engagement I want. People want to see me cook. And you'll start to know. And as long as you're like in your soul, you're in tune with that and you know you enjoy the cooking stuff too, then I think that's perfect. But 9 months is a really good amount of time because six can be too short. 6 months can fly by. A year might be a little too long. if you can grow a baby in 9 months, you can definitely grow an idea in 9 months.
That's good. I like that. What a
Yeah,
little golden nugget.
I just made that up. That wasn't pre-rehearsed.
Wow. Yeah, I've never heard that in my life. You always have these little golden nuggets where I'm like, that's a quote that needs to live on for eternity.
Yep, we're gonna make sure that that does.
Yeah, so I'm thinking too, I think about a lot of the career as a creator as people that go to college for 4 years and they're paying this university and they know I'm not really going to apply for the dream job until I get out. And that's 4 years. But for some reason, when it's like a freelance entrepreneurial thing, we're like, oh my gosh, we have to buy a phone for $1,000, way too much. Or like, oh my gosh, we have to do this for 3 months, way too long. And I'm like, but what happened to the 4 year expectation? Like, where you're gonna get even more out of it in faster than 4 years. Like, what is that? What do you think that difference is? Why do we have this like conditioned mindset for that?
I love that. I think we're just conditioned to think that way because from a young age, you're just taught like after school, you go to high school. And if you're lucky and successful, you go to college, and that's the next step. I spent $150,000 to go to college in New Jersey and become a civil engineer. And then as soon as I got a civil engineering job, that first day, I started on a Tuesday. Don't ask me why it wasn't a Monday. I thought that was weird. And I met someone in the kitchen, the receptionist, and she is a doll. Absolutely love her. Worked with her for a long time, for 2 years. But on that first day, I was like, hey, how's it going? I'm Nick. Just like my joyful, bubbly self. And she was like, it's all right, but it's not Friday yet. And I
Oh,
was like, oh, God. I started to see what I was in for. So then I started taking some of that money I was making and investing in myself. And I probably spent $10,000 or $20,000 on courses over the next year, building up my skills, my money making skills, my content creation skills. And then suddenly I realized I was like, okay, so college, not that college is a sham, definitely not going to say that, especially depending on your major, but it's
okay.
just not necessary. It's really expensive. And if you instead invest a little bit of money into yourself and things that you're passionate about, then you won't even need to work a job. You can become whatever it is you want to become and you can do what you want to do. So, did I kind of answer that question?
No, you did. You did. And I think that's why shiny object syndrome has a lot of strongholds on people because we see something and we think we have to do it right now. We have to go right now. We have to make this change right now because this person says you have to be doing this. I'm successful, you have to be doing this. And it's like we don't have that strong of opinions when it comes to the college thing. It's a lot more like we think more long term with it. But with I think entrepreneur mindsets and creativity and everything, we're like, oh, UGC is a big thing right now, we have to start doing it right now or we're going to miss out. And it's like, you're still going to have that opportunity for a job after 4 years. You wait for 4 years, but why don't we feel that way about other things in this world?
Yep. I think it comes back. I think it comes back to self doubt
Mm.
and the people that we surround ourselves with. It's hard to find people around you that are dreamers and that support your ambitions. Because when I was 22 and I told like my friends and family, I was like, I want to be a life coach on social media, but I'm working as a civil engineer. Everyone's like, yeah, don't quit your day job, kid. And it's hard to not be hurt by that. Like that affected
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
And even though everyone was supportive and believed me, and they were like, look, you're a hard worker, you could probably do anything. But you could tell that they don't actually mean or expect much. They're like, yeah, he'll probably just do that and fizzle out. And I think I stuck with it for 9 months before I started seeing like, I'm making a couple $100 a month doing this. People like me. People are starting to see change. My social media accounts are growing. They're certainly not big, but I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel of like, wait a minute, if you just dedicate yourself to one thing for a little bit of time, everything can fall into place. But most people give up too quickly. I would write in my journal all the time. I remember my first ever quarter of business, I made $250.
Wow.
Actually, it was my second quarter. My first one was okay because friends and family were supportive and were like, sure, I'll buy or whatever. Then the second one, my network kind of ran out. I made $250. I made one online sale. And I wrote in my journal and I was like, I am so hurt and upset, and I will still absolutely never quit. And I set a goal for the next quarter to make $1,000. And I ended up making $4,000 the next month, not
Wow.
quarter, month. So I then it started to then click. And this was probably like 7 or 8 months in. And I was like, okay, I'm now starting to see that if you just focus on one single thing, the payoff will start to come. But most people just give up too soon,
Yeah.
which is sad.
That, that makes sense. And I feel like going back to the whole supportive, the people around you, I feel like a lot of people share things based on their own experiences and what they feel like they should be doing. And it can be super hard whenever we're like, we're doing these things and there's so much opportunity. And this person is telling me from their own perspective. And I think that we know they're trying to help, we know they care, but at the same
Yes.
time we all have our own experience and journey. That person that might have not maybe like was fully supportive or believed in you, which I laugh because you're so successful now, but maybe that's because they're not supposed to do that, so of course they're going to have that perspective. And it's the same for success. Oh, I have a newsletter, that means you have to have a newsletter, like you have to, there's like you're not going to be successful without one, is the underlying message. And I think that's what gets us held up on that. So what would you say is a piece of advice to help overcome this?
Yeah, really good question. I feel like the biggest place to start is to stop comparing yourself and your journey to other people's.
Yeah.
You might see other people have a newsletter and just think, oh my God, I should be doing that. I have a newsletter. Meanwhile, maybe their newsletter is not actually doing anything for them, right? Just because you see someone else doing it and it exists doesn't mean that it's going well or that it's going to work for you. But we get so caught up in what other people are doing that we avoid looking inward and saying, what am I doing? And most importantly, like, what am I spinning my wheels on that's getting absolutely nothing done? Like, we
Mm,
make up tasks
yeah.
that we think are being productive. And I still do this sometimes and I have to catch myself and I'm like, look, this is not moving the needle at all. Even though I think like sometimes I just go and I'm like, let me just edit my LinkedIn a little bit. And and I look back and I'm like, I just spent an hour shuffling around my LinkedIn profile when instead that hour I could have made two pieces of content, changed 20 lives, and maybe brought in a new customer.
Mm,
So focusing on those tasks that actually provide output and not getting caught up in all of the other things that you see other people doing, I feel like that's a wonderful place to start. And another like hard hitting quote that I wrote down that I was just thinking like this applies so well: the bigger the ship, the less it pivots.
mm,
And I think that applies perfectly to business and creativity. For example, if you're an artist and you love to paint, but then after 8 months of painting, you haven't sold a piece of your artwork and you start getting into drawing, and now you're back to square one. And then after 6 months, you're like, you know what? I'm going to start doing, I don't know, a different kind of painting, right? Maybe you're going to watercolor now and it's a whole new skill. You used to do acrylic and it's like people just constantly change it up when instead, if you just focus and grow in one area, 9 months, I really think is enough time for someone to start to see results of their hard work. Because once you start to see results, it's easy to keep going. But people quit before they really see enough to convince themselves of what they're capable of.
yeah, that's true. One thing I found that has helped me, even with our podcast too, is like these ideas are great. I don't want to ignore all of the things that I feel like I could be doing. I literally write them down and I date them. And I'm like, I'm going to come back to this someday. But right now, this is getting out of my head. I won't have to process it. I won't have to be like, what was that thing I was thinking about? No more mental energy spent on that. Like, I know
Yep.
that I wrote it down and I'll come back to it eventually, you know?
That's a great idea. I do that all the time too. Like I have a giant whiteboard back behind this, and on it, I wrote study this guy. His name is Ben Settle. He's like an email marketing guru. And I wrote, I was like, study Ben Settle email marketing. But then I put a note next to it. I was just like, just not yet.
Mm,
Keep it in mind, come back to it at a later date because it's easy for me to get distracted and start producing less content and then get sucked into email marketing, which is something that people spend years learning how to do when I'm not just going to pick it up quickly. So I decided for myself, I was like, let's not chase that rabbit. We've already got one that we're going after. Let's stick with that.
yeah. So I think, yeah, comparison is probably, I'm glad you started with that. That's the biggest one, I feel like, is
Yes.
even with the people that I'm like, I see all these tweets. I've been doing UGC for 2 months and I haven't had a brand deal yet. I'm ready to quit. And that like breaks my heart because why are you ready to quit? What was shiny that's becoming dull? And why is that your priority? Like, what is this timeline that you're putting yourself on? And when you quit, what are you going to do next that you think you're going to do for 2 months and then see if it works out for you? So I think that comparison it's huge, but how does somebody practically how do you, as a life coach, advise people to stop comparing themselves? Because, like, I have other bottlenecks in my life, but you have great advice for people who struggle with that.
I would say first thing you have to do is distance yourself from your phone because where all of the comparison that we do between us and other people, it doesn't happen when you go pick up lunch at the restaurant like nearby. It happens when you're scrolling on your phone. So the first and last hour of your day, of anyone's day, including my own, I still fight myself on this, should be dedicated to doing things for you and staying off your phone. Because if you start your day on your phone, the first thing you're doing, you open up Instagram or TikTok, and boom, you're already comparing yourself to other people. Even if you don't like consciously notice it, it's happening.
Hmm.
Same thing with the last hour of your day, because that's where you do all of your subconscious programming for what your day is going to be like the next day and what you're going to dream about. So those 2 hours of the day are so precious. If you instead start your day and end your day doing things that make you feel good, like going for a walk, meditating, write in a journal, take a cold shower, do some yoga, literally anything that's just not your phone or TV, that's the recipe for me.
Okay. That makes sense because I don't get on my phone in the morning. You know this. I usually would take a 2 hour
Yes.
technology break, but on Wednesdays we have an early meeting, so I don't do that
Yes.
anymore. Um, but yeah, I'm like 2 hours, no meetings, nothing technology, all my morning routine. And then at night, I like get ready for bed. I'm a woman, so like I personally wear makeup and all of that. I have a nighttime skincare, no technology. And so that makes sense as to why that's not something that I struggle with. And I think that advice is so practical, but it's also, I think, super easy for people to forget how important it is to take those breaks.
I agree completely. Another really good tip I have, I make all of my clients do this, business coaching or life coaching clients. While I'm on a call with them, I'm like, all right, go into your bedroom. I know your phone charger is right next to your bed. Go move it across the room. And then they're like, how did you know that? And I'm like, come on, that's not, are you really that surprised? Like, your brain is addicted to your phone. So, of course, your charger is next to your bed. That way, as soon as you go to bed, like it's the last thing you see at night and it's the first thing you see when you wake up. And those are the people that tend to get stuck in a life they don't love or just a bad start to the day, even. So I have them move their charger across the room so that when you're getting in bed at night, you don't get stuck because we've all done it, right? You're like, let me just go on TikTok for a minute.
Yeah.
And then you look back and it's been 8 hours, the sun's coming up, and you're like, I messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that was me in 2020. But honestly, there's not always a bad thing about comparison. I think that there can be a healthy comparison to see what else is out there and just like know that it's possible. But there's a very fine line between negative and positive comparison.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. Same with the shiny object syndrome. I think there's pros and cons. Some pros are you might discover some new innovative money making ideas and learn how to solve more problems, but you have to be very cognizant of the fact that you're right. It's a very thin line between is this helping me or is this hurting me? Because the cons are way worse than the pros. The
Yeah.
cons are avoiding the things you know you should be doing, procrastinating, and avoiding getting good at fundamentals in whatever form of art or creativity that you're involved in. Instead, we'll get so consumed with like watching other people's TikToks when instead of watching 3 hours of other people's TikToks and feeling hurt that you're no good, you could have spent 30 minutes on YouTube for free learning like a new editing strategy that might help you improve your content. So
That's so good, Nick. I love that. Great advice.
I'm curious if maybe there's anything else that you can think of where maybe you've overcome shiny object syndrome and you stayed focused on one thing and started to see the payoff maybe trickle in and then snowball.
Yeah, Nick. I mean, I was not going to talk about this, but the 22-day challenge, I know you've probably seen my thing. I, for 22 days, focus on one thing. Like, I have to focus on doing this one thing. And every morning, I have to physically write on my iPad, I will do this because of this. Like, I remember my why, and then I plan out my day. And throughout the day, if I get distracted, and that's why I said in the beginning that it sounds like a big distraction. If I get distracted away from what I know my big goal is, then I need to regroup and go back to, okay, what was I supposed to be doing during this time? That has helped me, like being so self aware and intentional with each moment of my day. Because time is precious, time is money. It is just like, we can't get it back. And I want to make sure that I'm not only planning what I want my life to look like, but then taking the action steps to make that happen.
I love that. So would you say journaling and like actually writing things down is a big contributor to you staying focused?
Yeah, that's the number one thing is intentionally before I look at my phone every morning, I have it there and I'm like, I'm writing down what I'm doing. I'm reminding myself what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I have to write it down. That's just me. What about you?
I love that. I love that a lot. I'm the same way. And I'm also a good example of how this doesn't have to be or look perfect. Some days I'll just grab a piece of paper that I see laying around and I'll write on the back of it 10 things I need to get done today.
Mm.
And I'll put a star next to the top 3 so that I don't beat myself up if I don't do 10 things and I just know what are the 3 biggest needle movers. And then if I don't finish anything on that list, I have it for the next day. But I also have a whiteboard in here, a whiteboard in my bedroom that's literally just a 10-step to-do list. So I sometimes change the place that I'm tracking these things, but I'm the same way. I have to write it down and be like, what needs to get done today? What do I need to do for my business? How do I need to prepare for this podcast? What do I need to do in my personal life? I think that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
Scheduling things in your personal life. I'll put on there, take a nap sometimes. If I
Yeah.
didn't sleep well and I know I'm going to need some extra rest, I don't make a 10-step to do list when I know I won't get everything on there. I'll schedule time for rest.
Yeah, I schedule time to stretch. I'm like grounding time. Do the little frog pose on the ground. Like I do that throughout the day, and that's productive. Taking time to rest and breathe is productive. It's way more productive than when I say schedule out every hour. It's not that I'm like being busy every hour with stuff. It's like I am just scheduling out what do I know is good for my mental health. And I think that what you're saying too is you surround yourself and remind yourself with everything you need to do, right?
Absolutely,
It's
yeah.
like everywhere.
Absolutely. I'm constantly leaving myself reminders as well. I had to clean off like 10 sticky notes from my desk so that my desk looked presentable for this podcast, but I leave myself notes all the time. I'll leave them in my bedroom. I'll leave them places where I know maybe I'm anticipating that I'm going to get thrown off track. I'll leave myself a note that's like, hey, Nick, remember that thing you're supposed to do? I won't actually write, hey, Nick on it, but I have before, just anticipating problems before they come up, which
Mm,
goes back to like the phone charger thing. If your phone charger's next to your bed, you're setting yourself up for a problem, which is going to be starting and ending your day on your phone. By
yeah.
moving that, you're now setting yourself up to avoid a problem. So I love taking little steps like that. And I also love just hitting a frog pose when you need it. I took a yoga class. I took a yoga class on Sunday. Today's Tuesday. Yeah. And at the end of it, I just like hit. She didn't cue it, but I just hit a frog pose. And then she was like, "That's a good idea, Nick. Let's all meet in a frog pose." And I was like, "Amen." Sometimes you just need a frog pose. All right, Michelle, any other last minute thoughts on all of this? I feel like we covered a lot of stuff, a lot of good habits that everyone can implement, and a lot of ways that they can start to stay focused and create a bit of a more fulfilling and financially free life for themselves. Any other thoughts that you want to add?
I would just say at the end of the day, make sure that you are being intentional with each day and not comparing yourself. It sounds like those are very important aspects that can help with this shiny object syndrome. And it seems so simple, but I think that this can be really life changing for so many people if they think more long term about things and do the 9 months instead of like, I'm going to give it 2 months because this chick got 20 grand in 2 months, when that's also not a realistic timeline, which we will talk about in another episode. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just want people to know like, if you do have shiny object syndrome, we all have been there, especially if you're a business owner. Like, I think it's normal human nature, and we almost have to like prevent that from happening by taking these little bitty action steps.
Yeah, it's so true. Entrepreneurs are particularly susceptible to shiny object syndrome. It is a constant uphill battle. If you own or operate or even work at a business, it's very hard sometimes. But you're right. Staying intentional about everything that you're doing, setting the way you set yourself up and your day up, as well as prioritizing feeling good and doing things that actually like fill you with joy and purpose. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, this was such a fun first episode. I'm looking forward to many, many more. So, if you're looking for more ways to monetize your creativity and find more freedom in your life, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss our next episode. And be sure to check Michelle out on Instagram and TikTok. Her username is Michelle with two L's, four E's, JH. And mine is Get Ahead with Nick. That's all I got for today. Anything else, Michelle?
Nope. Excited for what's to come.
All right, cool. We'll see you guys next time.